A woman talked to an invisible entity and was later found dead. Teenagers disappeared while on a trip to the lake. A killer who chose his victims alphabetically. What unites these stories? None of the mentioned crimes were ever solved. In this video, we will tell you about such high-profile murders. At the end of the video, we will describe a case shrouded in mysteries where even the victim's name couldn't be determined. Enjoy watching. Her body was cut in half just below the ribs, her face disfigured with a cut from ear to ear, and rope marks found on her wrists. The murder of Elizabeth Short became one of the most sensational and gruesome crimes of the 20th century. The news of it reverberated across America in January 1947. Panic set in, with police questioning everyone who knew the young woman, and the press conducting its own investigation. However, despite all efforts, the case of the Black Dahlia, as the newspapers dubbed her, remained unsolved. Of course, there were theories and evidence. Forensic experts determined that the body had lain in an open field for over 10 hours. Doctors pointed out that the girl's body had been surgically dissected, an operation amputating the lower part of her torso. This indicated that the killer possessed medical knowledge. Crime scene investigators also found a footprint near the body and traces of the gasoline, which was used to clean the victim's body. An investigation began, and the first suspect was Robert Manley. Witnesses claimed to have seen Elizabeth with him on the day of the murder, but Manley denied any involvement and was released after several lie detector tests. The city went into a frenzy, and the police made numerous arrests, but to no avail. Several times, the police station received letters with confessions, threats and clues, but nothing substantial was found. Then, a letter arrived at the Herald Express, containing clippings from newspapers and personal information about the victim. Moreover, the envelope had been soaked in gasoline, just like Elizabeth's body. There was no doubt that the ominous letter was from the killer. However, investigators couldn't extract any information from the message, as all fingerprints and DNA traces had been destroyed by gasoline. In the spring of 1947, the investigation was officially closed, but the case was never forgotten. In 1999, a former police officer, Steve Hodel, began suspecting his father, George, in the murder of the young woman. Steve had started going through his father's medical archives after his death and found a small album with pictures of a beautiful girl. Comparing the photos with newspaper clippings, the detective concluded that the girl in the photos was Elizabeth Short. Afterward, Hodel Jr. examined the letters sent to the Herald Express and identified his father's handwriting. While more evidence pointing to George Hodel Sr. accumulated, it wasn't enough for an indictment. Even 76 years later, this brutal murder continues to haunt people's minds. This happened in the early 1970s. The first partially undressed body of Carmen Colon, an 11-year-old who had been brutally raped and murdered, was found in a ravine located about 10 meters from the road known as Stearns Road. The second body was discovered in the city of Webster. It was missing a skirt and tights, with a torn and bloodied white blouse. 11-year-old Wanda Walchuk had also been repeatedly raped and severely beaten before being strangled. There was no attempt to conceal the body. A few months later, the sheriff's office received a call from a farmer who had found another mutilated corpse not far from the road in the town of Macedon. It was the body of 10-year-old Michelle Mainzer, the last known victim. If you analyze the names of the victims and the locations of the crimes, a pattern emerges. The initial letters of the victims' first and last names matched the first letter of the town where the murder took place. Who could have committed such a sophisticated and meticulously planned series of crimes remains a mystery. During the investigation, it was discovered that the suspected serial killer drove a blue sedan. Witnesses had seen all the victims for the last time in this car before their deaths. Another significant factor was that the killer hunted with a cat, as cat fur was found on the victims' bodies and clothing. After the third and final murder, detectives began questioning everyone who might have information about the perpetrator. However, despite interviewing hundreds of people, the killer was never found. There were suspects, for example Dennis Terminini, but he took his own life 6 weeks after the last murder. In 2007, after DNA testing, all charges against Terminini were dropped. Joseph Naso, a serial killer born in Rochester, was also suspected. From 1977 to 1994, Naso killed between 6 and 10 women in California. For many years, he evaded capture, but at the age of 77, he was finally imprisoned and later executed. To this day, he remains the prime suspect in the Rochester alphabet murders case, but DNA analysis has not linked Nazo to the Rochester Strangler. The alphabet killer case remains open to this day. In 2013, at the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles, a 21-year-old Chinese student named Eliza Lam went missing without a trace. Eliza Lam's case continues to intrigue fans of the mysterious to this day. It appears that investigators have already found an explanation for what happened to the young woman. However, some circumstances suggest that things are not so simple. What are we talking about? Even before Eliza Lam's body was discovered, the footage from the hotel surveillance system had sparked considerable interest. The cameras captured Eliza's erratic behavior in the elevator and the corridor. It seemed as though she was either hiding in fear from someone or, on the contrary, playfully interacting. She randomly pressed buttons for different floors, peeked out of the elevator doors and then tried to hide. Based on her emotions, it appeared that she wasn't frightened at all, but rather having fun. The person who could have caused such behavior was not seen in the footage. Therefore, after the video was made public, many began to construct the most incredible theories. For example, some believed that demons had taken control of her, or that she was under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Some concluded that she might have suffered from schizophrenia, and these were just hallucinations. It was around that time that the guests at the Cecil Hotel noticed an odd smell in the water. They reported that the water pressure from the taps had become quite poor and requested a quick resolution to the issue. This prompted the hotel management to call in specialized services to inspect the water supply system. That's when Eliza Lam's body was found in the water tank, completely naked. Eliza Lam's clothing was discovered in the same reservoir: a sweater, a t-shirt, a skirt, and black lace underwear. According to the forensic expert's report, the young woman didn't drown, as there was no water found in her lungs. There were pinpoint hemorrhages on her eyelids, and she had several minor abrasions on her leg. No prohibited substances or alcohol were found in Eliza Lam's blood. Furthermore, it was revealed that she regularly took medications for bipolar disorder in the correct dosages, effectively managing her psychological condition. Therefore, the most plausible version here is that of murder. The perpetrator was never found. They left no trace behind. This story is unlikely to ever be solved and will remain a great enigma of our time, and another dark chapter in the history of the Cecil Hotel. In the summer of 1960, a horrifying tragedy unfolded on the picturesque shore of Lake Bodom in Finland. On that day, teenage girls Mela Björklund and Anja Mäki, along with their 18-year-old boyfriend Seppo Boisman and Nils Gustafsson, set out for a romantic getaway, choosing a scenic camping spot. They arrived in the evening, planning to spend the night and cook snacks over a campfire. The next day, at around 11 a.m., a man named Risto Siren was swimming in the lake near the campsite when he noticed an unusual tent on the shore. It appeared somewhat out of place, collapsed and severely damaged, almost torn to shreds. Siren found it strange, because there had been no strong storms the previous evening and night. As he approached, he called out to anyone who might be inside, but received no response. It was only then that he noticed something red on the tent fabric. Siren froze in shock. 4 lifeless bodies lay inside, drenched in blood, as if brutally slashed with a large knife. 2 bodies were inside the remains of the tent, another one on top, and the 4th slightly to the side on the grass. When law enforcement arrived, it was discovered that Nils Gustafsson was still alive. Although he had suffered significant physical injuries, he couldn't remember anything except for his account of a supernatural figure. His shoes with bloodstains were found nearly a kilometer away from the tent. The belongings of the other young people were also scattered around. In the 1960s, Gustafsson's involvement in the events was not conceded. No arrests were made, and in the following years, several suspects emerged. The first was Carla Gerster Frossman, who sold food at the camping site and was known to be an extremely aggressive individual. There were reports that Frossman often maliciously damaged tents of tourists and even threw stones into them. However, the police stated that he couldn't have committed the crime since he had an alibi. Another suspect was a fraudster named Pentti Soininen, who confessed to murders while serving time in prison for other charges. However, the police found no connection between him and the Lake Bodom events. This eventually led the investigation back to Niels Gustafsson. Investigators suspected that Gustafsson had attacked his friends due to a conflict that had arisen. An eyewitness, a cyclist passing by the tent, testified in court that she saw Gustafsson and Boisman arguing. Perhaps Gustafsson's girlfriend had started flirting with Boisman, triggering his aggression. She was the most severely wounded. The police theorized that the others had kicked Gustafsson out of the tent, possibly after he had broken Boisman's jaw in a fight. He then returned for revenge. His cuts were considered not deep enough, given the severe injuries to the other group members. However, Gustafsson consistently denied his involvement and was ultimately acquitted. Over 60 years have passed since the events of June 1960. The Lake Bodom murders have become a hallmark of Finland, and some still wonder, if Gustafsson couldn't remember what happened, how did he know he wasn't the perpetrator? In 1982, Mary Kellerman from Chicago turned 12. Unfortunately, she caught a cold. Early in the morning, she went into her parents' room complaining of a sore throat. Her caring mother gave her a Tylenol tablet, which is just a well-known name for paracetamol. Several hours later, Mary was found dead in her own bed. On that same day, ambulance crews were responding to emergencies all over the city. For example, they found mail carrier Adam Janus lying on the floor in his apartment. His family had gathered to discuss the upcoming funeral, when at the same time, Adam's brother Stanley began to experience a severe headache. Stanley found an open package of Tylenol in his brother's house, took a pill himself, and gave one to his wife. Both of them died on the same day in the same house. The investigation suspected foul play with Tylenol after lethal doses of cyanide were discovered in its composition. Although similar medicines were distributed nationwide, the poisonings were only happening in Chicago. Soon, a mysterious chain of events seemed to unfold. A letter was sent to the factory producing Tylenol, in which an unknown person threatened to continue mass poisonings unless they paid him $1 million. The secret sender of the letter was quickly identified as James Lewis, who, however, denied any involvement in the case. The investigation found no evidence against Lewis, and he was only sentenced to 20 years in prison for extortion. More than 100 investigators searched for the Chicago poisoner, working through thousands of scenarios and investigating 400 suspects. The case files contain over 20,000 pages, but it never led to a resolution. The case remains unsolved. 26-year-old Frederick Benonis was driving along the Fox Chase area when a rabbit darted in front of his car. It wasn't surprising, as this Philadelphia suburb was known for its wildlife. The student decided to stop and try to catch the animal, but after chasing it for about 100 meters, he couldn't catch the fast creature. Instead, he stumbled upon a strange cardboard box measuring 100 by 50 centimeters. To his horror, it contained the body of a small boy wrapped in a blanket. Examination of the body revealed that it belonged to a child aged 4 to 5 years, standing at 102 centimeters tall and weighing 12 kilos. The weight didn't correspond to the age, suggesting malnutrition, possibly even forced starvation. However, this contradicted the child's external condition: well-kept nails, clean and neat clothing, and neatly trimmed hair. The cause of death was severe head trauma. Forensic experts determined that the child had died between 2 days and 2 weeks before the discovery, and for a long time after death, the body had been in cold storage. The police realized that finding the perpetrator would be difficult and immediately began searching for the victim's relatives. Over 400,000 flyers were distributed with the child's photo and description, but no one who responded could identify the boy. A family of itinerant workers was suspected. Because 7 children had died in their care over the past few years, the parents simply couldn't afford to take care of them and had been stripped of their parental rights. However, their connection to the boy in the box couldn't be confirmed. The child was buried without a name. There were several other theories about what had happened, most of them highly implausible, except for one. Not far from where the box was found, the Foster family lived, running a private foster home for adopted children. They took children into their care and then placed them with new families, receiving some form of compensation in return. Remington Bristow, the author of this theory and an assistant to the medical examiner during the autopsy of the child's body, tirelessly investigated the case until his death in 1993. He visited the foster family several times and noticed their unease when questioned. Soon after, the Fosters decided to move, and Bristow visited their house as a potential buyer, inspecting every corner. In the backyard, he found a blanket similar to the one the body had been wrapped in. However, according to witnesses, the Fosters had never taken in young children. Bristow then concluded that the child was the illegitimate son of the Foster's daughter, hidden from the public eye due to societal condemnation and accidentally killed. The police did not accept Bristow's theory and asked him not to bother the family any further. Thus, the case of the boy in the box remains an unsolved mystery. These crimes indeed stirred a huge public response. They have inspired numerous TV series and films and continue to be discussed to this day, despite the passage of time. What do you think about these cases? Feel free to share your theories in the comments. Thank you for watching.